We're back. In December, the then newly appointed Vaccine Minister Nadhim Zahawi promised me that vaccine passports would never be introduced.
You will not be having immunity passports at all. It's discriminatory and wrong. Absolutely not. Categorically, there will not be an immunity passport in the United Kingdom.
Discriminatory and wrong, he said. Well, fast forward 8 months, and Boris Johnson yesterday declared in his Freedom Day address that nightclubs and other venues should demand punters show their NHS COVID pass, which serves as proof of being fully vaccinated, having natural immunity or recently testing negative for entry. He called it a matter of social responsibility. But while much of the embattled hospitality sector has bristled at this new measure, new figures released today show there may be a necessary evil, according to the public. YouGov poll shows 47% of people oppose the reopening of nightclubs and just 39% approve of them. Joining me now, Steve Baker. He is the Deputy Chair of the COVID Recovery Group, and Adam Brooks, landlord at the Owl and the Three Colt pub in Essex. They both worry that vaccine passports could be the death knell for the industry. However, Dominic Wilkinson, Professor of Medical Ethics at the University of Oxford, says vaccine passports are the best way for nightclubs to reopen safely and argue they are no different to other forms of medical certification. They all join me now. So, Professor, let me start with you. You're a Professor of Medical Ethics. I mean, I would put it to you, there's nothing ethical about vaccine passports.
Well, I think you've got my view slightly incorrect. I support vaccine passports where they're proportionate to the risk. And so there are good cases for vaccine passports and bad cases. I think there are good cases for thinking about vaccine or immunity certification for travel, for self-isolation, and for access, for example, in care homes, hospitals, situations where there are people who are highly vulnerable. I don't think there's a good case for using vaccine passports for access to venues. I'm sympathetic to the concerns of those in the hospitality sector that this is both impractical and unnecessary.
OK, so you wouldn't want them for access to a mass event, for example, at the O2 Arena in London with a capacity of 50,000 people?
Well, I think that there's important questions to think about with large events of that sort, about what the risks are of, for example, having super spreader events if you've got very large numbers of people in close contact. So you might have to think about, well, are you going to have large numbers of people if you take all comers? If you take all comers, are you going to have to restrict the number of people and have some restrictions on movement? Or are you going to be able to have larger numbers if you can be sure that those who attend are immune, are at low risk of passing on the virus? I think those are questions that the government ought to be giving some direction on. And of course, they're giving very mixed messages at the moment, saying simultaneously that there are no more rules, but that venues should be making up the rules as a matter of social responsibility. And that seems like an abdication of responsibility.
Because right now, Steve Baker, there is mass confusion for this industry, is there not? Boris Johnson says, well, it's up to you. We hope you enforce their use. But this paper that was released last night says that the government plans to make domestic vaccine passports the law for large venues like nightclubs if the venues fail to implement them on a voluntary basis.
Well, Dan, thanks very much indeed for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. And, you're right, of course, there is confusion. And it's very interesting that the government's guidelines really accept that there is a risk of breaking equalities law because they tell venues that they must make sure that they comply. So what I would say is there's really a huge role for personal responsibility here when we go about our lives within the UK. So if people are going to a nightclub, they're going to understand what they're going to get in a nightclub, which is close contact with very large numbers of people. And they really should take responsibility for their own risks. It's up to them to know that they have been double vaccinated and are comfortable with the residual risk, or indeed if they've chosen not to be vaccinated at all, that they are taking the risk of contracting COVID in that venue. And this might be a radical thought, but, I do think we do need to take responsibility for ourselves and the consequences of the choices that we make. But I do think that government at the moment is putting businesses in a very, very difficult position.
Because Adam Brooks, it is down to you now. It's down to you. The Prime Minister says he wants you to introduce these things. But on Monday, are you going to be asking the people coming in your pubs to show their NHS app, to show essentially a vaccine passport?
No way. I mean, look, I've got 2 pubs. I don't have a nightclub, but I've owned nightclubs in the past. I've got friends in the nightclub industry that are pulling their hair out because they do not know what to do at the moment. You know, if they don't, they're worried about being shamed by the people that like to shame everyone at the moment. And if they don't, they're worried about the government. So one thing about nightclubs is people seem to think that people just plan to go to nightclubs. In my experience of having them in the past, we would always scout the restaurants, the bars, the local pubs to see how busy they were in town. And we'd roughly know how busy we're going to be of a night because not everyone plans to go out on a Saturday night or a Friday night. You know, it can be spontaneous. These passports take that away. They take the spontaneity out of going out. If you've got to test or you've got to have had your vaccines, which we know a lot of young people are not going to be double vaccinated until late summer. So nightclubs have got a very limited pool of people now, and they've got to hope, if they do implement these, or if they don't, but the ones that do, I've got to hope that those pool of people are going to be enough to make them money. My views on vaccine passports. I think they're morally wrong, and the Parliamentary Select Committee even ruled itself that it discriminates on race, age, socio-economic situations, religion. I can't believe our government in 2021 would be pushing these things. And I think they've done it voluntarily because they know they can't get it through law.
Yeah, very good point. And I mean, Adam, we know, don't we, that it would have a devastating financial effect on the events industry, for example, because of the government's own analysis that showed the industry would only actually ever return to 71% of their pre-pandemic turnover if vaccine passports were in place. That's a loss of £3.5 billion. That's just from the events industry. So there's an immediate knock-on effect to venues and the hospitality industry, and especially events, if the government does one day this year and enforce the use of these vaccine passports, which increasingly seems almost inevitable.
I mean, last year, 660,000 hospitality jobs were lost in 2020. What's going to happen if we have a winter of discontent, a winter of COVID obsession again? We cannot obsess about this very serious disease. A lot of people have died. There's no undermining that at all. But as Chris Whitty said in April, we've got to learn to live with this like we do flu. Now, we don't have certification for flu. I've never asked anyone to test themselves for flu before they come in the pub. We've got to get our senses back here.
You're right. You're right. But Steve Baker, so obviously there's the financial implications, there's the moral implications, but there's also something much deeper than that, isn't there? I mean, to me, this would really mark the first step on the road towards a biosecurity state.
Well, I'm afraid it would, yes. I mean, there are really profound issues here at stake about who we want to become. I have to say, if I boil it down to what I think this is really about, I think really what the government's trying to do here is to encourage take-up of vaccination amongst young people. I mean, I think I've heard it in conversation privately. That's their big worry, that the risk of not hitting herd immunity because young people know that they're at relatively low risk from the disease. And I would certainly encourage young people, please have the vaccination, but I wouldn't encourage young people to do it by implementing, as you say, steps towards a biosecurity state. And I think, really very mainstream commentators like Fraser Nelson for The Spectator have now warned about our progress towards a biosecurity state. It's not just people like me in Parliament, so I am very concerned about where we're going. I know what Boris Johnson has said in the past about eating his ID card if he was forced to have one. Michael Gove has in the past given strident warnings. Nadeem Zahawi, in a debate in the House of Commons, gave me very much the same assurances that he gave you. So, this is a fix and a pickle, but I think it's because they're trying to encourage young people to get vaccinated. So my best hope now is that when young people are vaccinated and we do reach herd immunity, this idea of any kind of COVID status certification within the UK going about our ordinary lives will just fall away. But, I won't rest until that happens.
So, Dominic Wilkinson, I come back to you as a professor of medical ethics, and this is not a loaded question, genuinely, but is this ethical? I mean, we see Macron in France saying, look, you're not going to be able to go into a shop to buy a pint of milk. You're not going to be able to get on the bus. You're not going to be able to travel whatsoever if you are unvaccinated. And he's now even considering compulsion, enforced vaccination. We seem to be heading closer to that here. Is any of this ethical?
So in terms of the ethics of public health measures, of restrictions that we've encountered in the last 18 months, the basic principles are they proportionate to the harm you're trying to avoid, and are they necessary? Now, at this point in time, we're relaxing restrictions, we're allowing people to move come next week. It doesn't seem like it's necessary or proportionate. But imagine this as a realistic scenario. The Netherlands, we've just seen, has rewound some of its loosening up. They've seen a huge spike in cases following a large number of people going out to nightclubs. And so they're suddenly having to re-implement rules. So you've expressed some of the real financial concerns of the entertainment industry, of pubs and nightclubs. Imagine in a month's time or 2 months' time, if we have a severe rise in cases and the government saying, OK, we're going to close the pubs again. Well, one of the ways that those pubs and nightclubs could continue is by the government saying, look, you can keep going if you restrict access to those who
well, look, let me just put that question to Adam finally then, Adam. If that was the choice, you're closed or you institute vaccine passports. I know that's a Sophie's choice for you, but what would you do?
I'd close.
OK.
It's morally wrong. It's scary to me that, why should I stand on my front door and put myself in danger to a group of 5 or 6 lads or whoever and risk an angry confrontation or a fight because I'm asking them to prove a medical procedure or a medical choice. We have lost all sense of reality. If you think one pubs could afford that, we would probably have to employ a doorman or 2 doormen on the front door from open till close. Now, for a small pub, that could be £1,000 to £2,000 a week. I might as well stay shut. And if we're going to go that route in the winter, I hope the government just tell us now, because I'll hand in the keys. There is no point having a pub, a restaurant, a nightclub, if the government are going to be so stupid towards hospitality and so disrespectful to hospitality and a pillar of the economy. If hospitality goes, say goodbye to your NHS, because the economy is going to go. They've got to realise.
It's an extraordinary position, isn't it? Putting a pub landlord in the position of having to ask his customers for their health papers. It's just extraordinary. That's the Essex pub landlord, Adam Brooks, Steve Baker, Deputy Chair of the COVID Recovery Group of MPs, and Dominic Wilkinson, the Professor of Medical Ethics at the University of Oxford. Thank you all for tonight's clash. Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.